The wind howled through the wide plains of Montana that morning, carrying the smell of old timber and forgotten dust. Jack Lawson tightened the rope around his saddlebag, his weathered hands trembling slightly, not from age, but from the weight of what he was about to do. He was down to his last few $100s, and that morning, he had decided to gamble it all on something everyone else in town called a curse. The McAllister homestead, locals whispered, had been abandoned for nearly 80 years. No one stayed there for more than a week. People spoke about strange lights near the barn, voices echoing from the dry well, and horses refusing to cross the front gate. The property had been auctioned off several times, but buyers always backed out. Some claimed to see shadows moving behind broken windows at night. Jack didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in opportunity. After all, he was a ranch hand with nothing left to lose. His last job ended when the ranch owner passed away, and the new investors replaced men like him with machines. So when he saw the notice pinned on the feed store wall, Old McAllister Ranch, $300, cash only, he took it as a sign. He rode there at dawn with his horse, Dusty. The closer they got, the heavier the silence became. The wooden fences leaned like tired soldiers, the barn roof sagged under the years, and the house itself stood there, tall, gray, and eerily still, like it was holding its breath. Dusty snorted and stomped. Horses felt things before people did. Jack patted his neck. "Easy, boy. It's just old wood and wind," he murmured, though he wasn't so sure himself. Inside the farmhouse, dust floated in the sunlight like ash. There were signs someone had left in a hurry decades ago, dishes on the table, a rocking chair still turned toward the window, and a half-burnt candle by the stairs. Jack set down his bag and whispered, "Home, sweet home," forcing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. That night, the wind picked up again. The old house creaked and groaned as if remembering pain. Jack tried to sleep, but Dusty kept neighing outside. He got up, lantern in hand, and went to calm him. That's when he saw it, a faint blue glow coming from the ground near the back of the barn. It flickered, like light under water. He froze. There shouldn't have been electricity here. Dusty pawed the ground and whinnied again, his breath steaming in the cold air. Jack approached slowly, boots sinking into the mud. He kneeled and brushed the dirt away. Underneath, something metallic glinted, a small, rusted handle barely visible through the soil. "What the hell?" he whispered. It looked like a trapdoor. The light was seeping through the cracks. Then, suddenly, Dusty reared back, terrified. Jack fell onto the ground. For a split second, the light grew brighter, humming like it was alive, then it disappeared, leaving only darkness and the echo of the wind. Jack's heart pounded. He backed away, staring at the ground where the glow had been. He didn't know it yet, but that hidden door would unravel a story buried for nearly a century, one that no one had dared to open. At first light, the ranch didn't look haunted, it just looked tired. Frost glazed the grass, and the barn threw a long, crooked shadow over the yard like a finger pointing at yesterday's mistake. Jack poured coffee from a dented tin pot and watched the spot where the blue light had pulsed. In daylight, it was only dirt, the kind that had learned to keep secrets. Dusty grazed near the fence but kept lifting his head toward the barn, ears pricked, nostrils flaring. Horses don't stare at nothing. Jack followed his gaze, coffee steaming in the morning cold. The ground where he'd seen the glow had a faint ellipse of darker soil now, like the earth had sweat through the night. He took a shovel and worked in a steady rhythm, push, lift, breathe. Old roots snagged the blade like fingers. After 20 minutes, metal kissed metal with a dull, stubborn clang. Jack knelt. The hinge line was there, crusted in red rust, a trapdoor no bigger than a hay bale lid, iron-banded, braced like it expected a war. The handle was fused to the band with corrosion and time. Jack fetched oil from the tack room and dripped it along the seam, listening to the barn groan in the wind. That's when he noticed the horseshoe nailed above the doorframe, turned up like a cup to catch luck. But someone had scratched a thin line through it, a slash right down the middle. Bad omen or bored teenager, he told himself, and kept working. A truck slowed on the dirt road and stopped by the fence line. A thin old man in a canvas coat climbed down. "You the buyer?" he called, voice dry as mesquite bark. "I am," Jack said, wiping his hands. "Jack Lawson." The old man hooked his fingers in his belt. "Caleb Hart. Ran cattle west of here 40 years. My daddy helped the McAllisters mend fence the spring before, well." He nodded at the farmhouse. "Before they left." "People say they ran," Jack said. "Others say they didn't get the chance." Caleb's eyes skimmed the yard, then fixed on Dusty. "Horses won't go near the old well," he said. "Won't cross the line to the east of the barn after sunset. They remember things." He stepped closer, slow, like the wind might snap him. "You see the mark?" "What mark?" Caleb squatted and brushed dirt off a low beam on the barn's base. A symbol was carved there, shallow but careful, a circle with a vertical bar, like a keyhole or a well shaft with a spine. Beneath it, 1910. "McAllister brand for their special stock," he said. "Not cattle. They're other business." Prohibition came a decade later, but folks around here were preparing early. "Hiding things." "Whiskey?" Jack asked. Caleb held his stare. "Sometimes liquor. Sometimes not." He glanced at the dark patch of earth. "If you found the door, leave it. Town's got a peace with this place. You break it, the peace breaks back." Jack almost laughed. Almost. But the old man's face wasn't selling superstition, it was selling memory. "I appreciate the warning," Jack said. "But I can't fix a roof with rumors." Caleb nodded once, small and final. "When you hear bells where there ain't none, go inside. And if your horse tries to take you away, let him." He tipped his cap and left without looking back. The wind picked up, snapping the loose tin on the barn roof. Bells, Jack thought. He'd heard nothing but wind and his own ragged breath last night. Still, when he turned, Dusty had moved, 15 paces east, head low, foreleg pawing the dirt in short, impatient strokes. "Show me, then," Jack said, walking over. Dusty pawed again, scraping up chips of old brick. Jack knelt and brushed aside a layer of brittle weeds. A flat stone lay sunk in the earth, its face etched with the same circle-ambar symbol and a faint horseshoe stamp below it. A keyhole had been chiseled into the stone's edge, so thin he'd have missed it without Dusty's fussing. "Good boy," Jack breathed. He pried the stone up. Beneath it, a small brass tube, capped at one end, blackened by time. Inside the tube, wrapped in oilcloth, he found a key, iron, heavy, with a bow shaped like a horseshoe. He didn't smile, he couldn't. It felt too much like a sentence being handed down. Back at the trapdoor, the key fit the banded lock like it had been waiting specifically for his hand. Iron clicked. Rust protested. The lock gave with a shudder that moved up his arm. He hesitated. Caleb's words nested in his head, "Leave it. Peace breaks back." Jack looked up at the house. The window panes threw back a warped reflection of his lantern, a wavering, uncertain flame. He thought of the $300 in crumpled bills he'd slid across a counter and the laugh the clerk tried to hide when he counted them. He thought of sleeping in the cold and the taste of boiled beans and the way the wind in some places sounds like it's trying to say your name. He set the lantern on a crate, wrapped his fingers around the iron ring, and pulled. The door lifted 2 inches, then stuck. A soft sigh rose from the gap, air, old and sweet with rot and something floral, like a perfume that had forgotten the woman who wore it. Dusty blew hard through his nose and danced sideways, muscles bunched. "Easy," Jack said, though his voice had gone thin. He wedged the shovel under the lip and levered up. The trapdoor came free with a grinding moan and folded back on its hinge, revealing a square of darkness that drank the morning light. A ladder dropped into the black, rungs hand-worn smooth, wood-polished by more than one life. He lowered the lantern until the light pooled at the bottom. Stone walls. A narrow room. Shelves. Bottles. A wooden trunk with iron bands. And on the far wall, a rectangle of white that was not stone, not wood, canvas, tacked taut, painted with a figure standing in a field of blue. Jack blinked. The figure's head was turned, eyes off to the side, toward the ladder. Toward him. Wind gusted, slamming the barn door. From somewhere deep below, soft and unplaceable, a bell rang once, clear as water over glass. Dusty bolted, dragging the lead rope against the post, frantic and free. Jack didn't chase him. The bell rang again, closer this time, though there was no bell in the barn, and no church for 15 miles. He gripped the ladder. If there's peace to break, he said into the dark, it started breaking long before me. And then he climbed down. The air thickened the lower Jack went, until breathing felt like drinking from a well. The ladder ended on a stone floor, damp and uneven. His lantern's flame bent in the draft, its light struggling to stay alive. The room stretched longer than it looked from above, carved straight into the ground, walls lined with narrow shelves of glass jars, some cracked, some still sealed with wax. Each one held something. Shapes distorted by murky liquid, feathers, dried herbs, once living things long surrendered to preservation. At the far end stood the painting, the figure in the blue field. It wasn't oil or watercolor but pigment on cloth, faded yet disturbingly precise. The woman's eyes, though worn by age, seemed painted with intent. Her gaze wasn't at him exactly, but slightly past, as if watching something that might reappear behind his shoulder. Jack turned, only stone and shadows. He drew closer. The canvas edges were pinned to the wall by small, rusted nails. Beside it sat a wooden trunk, padlocked and swollen with moisture. When he set the lantern beside it, the light picked up writing faintly burned into the lid, E.M. McAllister, 1911. Jack's breath caught. That was the matriarch's name. According to what little he'd heard, Eleanor McAllister had gone missing the same year her husband's ranch fell apart. Some said she ran away. Others whispered her body was never found. The padlock looked ancient, its bow covered in green oxidation. He reached into his coat pocket for the key he'd found under the stone, the horseshoe key. It slid in, hesitated, then turned with a clean, metallic snap that echoed through the chamber like a pistol crack. Inside the trunk were photographs, dozens of them, edges curled, faces blurred by time. Ranchers, women in high collars, a young girl with braids holding a foal, and one image that froze him, the same woman from the painting, standing beside the very barn he now stood under, smiling faintly, a bell clutched in her hand. The background shimmered strangely in the photograph's gloss, as if light had been captured bending around her. Under the photographs lay a book, wrapped in oilcloth. When he unwrapped it, the smell of lavender rose faintly, still alive after decades. The first page was inscribed, "If the bells ring, it is because they were called. Do not answer. E.M. McAllister." The pages following were filled with hurried script, records of sounds, dreams, and rituals Jack couldn't understand. Words like veil, the blue field, and the tethered light. On one page, she had drawn a sketch of a circle with a vertical bar, the same mark carved on the barn beam. Beneath it, scrawled in trembling ink, "It grows restless below the house." Jack shut the book. For the first time, the air didn't just feel heavy, it listened. His lantern dimmed, the flame shrinking, the glass fogging from within. And then, soft as silk, came the sound, that bell again, distant yet near, ringing through the earth like a heartbeat too slow to be human. He lifted the lantern toward the tunnel leading under the floorboards. The air there shimmered faintly blue. Dusty's distant whinny echoed from above, muffled but desperate. Jack took a step toward the tunnel, then froze. A handprint appeared on the inside of the painting's canvas, pressing out, stretching the fabric from behind. Fingers. 5 of them. Thin. Trembling. Then gone. Jack's voice caught in his throat. "Eleanor." Nothing answered, just a low hum, rising like a sigh from the tunnel. The sound of something shifting against the stone, closer. He backed toward the ladder, gripping the journal. As he placed his foot on the first rung, the bell tolled again, this time above him, inside the barn. Dusty neighed, wild and terrified. Jack climbed fast, lantern swinging, every muscle screaming. When he emerged into the barn, the morning sun had darkened behind rolling clouds. Dusty was gone again, lead rope torn free. The bell sound now came from the farmhouse porch, steady, rhythmic, deliberate. Jack turned toward it, pulse pounding. The front door, which he'd locked the night before, was wide open. Jack's boots hit the porch steps, each creak of wood sounding louder than it should in the morning stillness. The bell's chime had stopped, replaced by the faint ticking of something unseen, like a heartbeat muffled by walls. He pushed the front door wider. The hinges groaned, and dust fell in thin streams from the frame. Inside, the air had changed. The faint scent of lavender drifted through the hall again, mixed with the sharper smell of wet wood and rust. The house looked almost alive now. Curtains that had hung limp yesterday shifted slightly, as though stirred by breath, not breeze. Jack's reflection in the cracked hall mirror wavered, stretched, and returned as he passed. The old grandfather clock in the corner, which had been silent since he arrived, now ticked with precise rhythm, though its hands hadn't moved an inch. "Anyone here?" Jack's voice broke the hush, a dry sound swallowed by the hallway. No answer. Only a faint scuffing upstairs. He set the lantern on the sideboard, drew his revolver from its worn holster, and started up the stairs. Each step gave under his weight. The light below threw long shadows up the wall, and for a moment, he could swear a second shadow climbed beside him, a thinner one, moving out of sync. At the landing, the sound stopped. A door at the end of the hall stood half open. The faint lavender smell was strongest there. Jack pushed the door slowly with the barrel of his gun. The room beyond was small, a child's bedroom frozen in another century, a narrow bed under a lace canopy, a wooden rocking horse, a cracked photograph frame on the dresser. The wallpaper peeled in curls, revealing older layers beneath, one patterned with blue fields and white flowers, the same blue that covered the background of the painting below. The bed covers were rumpled, though he hadn't touched them. And on the pillow, laid carefully as if by gentle hands, sat a small brass bell. Jack stepped closer, pulse hammering. He reached for it. The bell rang, sharp, clear, without being touched. He stumbled back. The sound echoed, multiplied, like a dozen unseen hands ringing identical bells in distant rooms. Then silence again, so complete it roared. From the doorway behind him came a whisper, low and female, words drawn out like wind over grass. "Why did you open it?" Jack spun, gun raised. The hall was empty. His heart pounded so hard he felt it in his teeth. He backed away from the room, still holding the lantern high. The flame flickered wildly, struggling to stay upright in air that felt too cold for day. The whisper came again, closer this time, from somewhere below. "You let it out." The trapdoor. Jack turned and ran down the stairs, boots slamming the wood. The front door slammed shut as he reached the foyer, though no one was there to move it. The clock's hands now pointed to midnight. He didn't know what that meant, it was broad daylight outside. Back in the barn, the trapdoor yawned open, the lantern he'd left beside it now extinguished. The air above it shimmered faintly blue again, pulsing, like breath from the earth. He called for Dusty, no answer. Only wind. He crouched by the opening, staring down into darkness. The sound of the bell returned, soft, irregular, echoing from the tunnel below. Then, footsteps. Slow. Coming up the ladder. Jack aimed the revolver. His voice cracked. "Who's there?" The steps stopped one rung below the surface. Silence. And then a pale hand, small and dirt-caked, gripped the edge of the opening. Not ghostly white, but human, shaking. Another followed. Slowly, painfully, someone began to rise out of the dark, a figure wrapped in the shredded remains of what might once have been a dress. Hair hung in gray ropes, and where her face should have been was only shadow until she lifted it toward the light. Her eyes were open. Not angry, not even alive, just endless. Jack fired. The shot exploded in the confined space, ringing like thunder. The figure flinched but didn't fall. The sound of the bell grew louder, wild, almost joyous. And then she spoke again, clear and calm, "You shouldn't have come alone." The barn door slammed shut. The lantern burst into blue flame. Jack staggered back as the boards beneath him trembled, dust raining from the rafters. The horses' frantic cries cut through the chaos somewhere beyond the walls, but they were distant now, as if coming from another world entirely. The woman, or whatever she was, stepped fully into the light, the blue glow bleeding out from her skin like mist. Her voice softened, and for a fleeting second, it almost sounded human. "Help me finish what they started." The bell in her hand rang once more, and everything went dark. Darkness swallowed the world whole. For a moment, Jack couldn't tell if his eyes were open or closed. The air hummed low and steady, like the sound of bees inside a coffin. Then, slowly, the blue glow returned, soft, throbbing, emanating from the floorboards beneath him. He pushed himself upright, chest heaving, and realized he wasn't in the barn anymore. The walls around him were the same stone as the chamber below, but the room was wider now, like the earth itself had shifted to make space. Lanterns hung from iron hooks, flickering with an unnatural blue fire. In their light stood rows of wooden crosses, driven into the dirt floor. Each one bore a small brass bell tied with black thread. And in the center of them all, standing perfectly still, was the woman. She looked younger now. Her dress hung intact, her hair dark again, her skin pale but no longer gray. The blue light wrapped her like fog. In one hand, she held the same bell Jack had seen on the pillow upstairs. In the other, the journal he'd taken from the trunk. Jack's voice came out a hoarse whisper. "What are you?" She turned, her expression unreadable. "I was what this land made me." He took a step forward, careful. "Eleanor McAllister?" The name seemed to catch her breath. She looked up, eyes shining. "That was once my name." "What happened here?" Jack asked. "Why is this place cursed?" Eleanor's gaze drifted toward the crosses. "Cursed," she repeated softly. "That's what they called it. But it wasn't a curse. It was a covenant." Jack's heart hammered. A covenant with what? She smiled faintly, and for a moment, she didn't look ghostly at all, just tired. "When the drought came in 1910, the river died, the cattle died, and the people followed. My husband tried everything, prayers, trades, sacrifices. But the land wanted more. It wanted to be remembered. It wanted witnesses." She raised the bell. "So we built this place, and we gave it voices. Every bell, a promise. Every life taken, a memory bound to the soil. The land would thrive again, but only if someone kept ringing the bells." Jack felt the air tighten, as though the earth beneath him was listening. "And when you stopped?" Her expression hardened. "The land took us back. All of us. But the covenant doesn't end. It only waits for someone to open the door." Jack's throat went dry. "Me?" Eleanor nodded once. "You rang the bell." The air trembled. Bells began to ring softly, one, then another, until the sound filled the room like a rising tide. The crosses shook, their bells clattering, voices of the dead whispering through the air. Jack clamped his hands over his ears, but the sound came from inside him now, echoing through bone and memory. "Make it stop," he shouted. Eleanor's eyes gleamed with that strange blue light. "It will stop when you finish what we began." He stumbled backward, bumping into one of the crosses. The wood splintered, and the bell attached to it fell and rolled across the floor, ringing once before coming to rest. The ringing stopped everywhere else, every bell silenced at once. Eleanor froze. Jack bent and picked up the fallen bell. It felt heavier than it should, vibrating faintly in his palm. "What happens if I break it?" he asked. Her voice was a whisper of wind and sorrow. "Then the land sleeps forever. No more harvests, no more rain, no more memory. It will die, and so will everything bound to it." Jack's hand shook. He looked around at the crosses, dozens of them, each marking a soul trapped here. And if I don't? Then you become one of us. The bells began to ring again, faintly at first, then louder, until the sound filled every corner of the room. The ground trembled. The air turned cold enough to burn. Jack looked at Eleanor, who now seemed less woman than wind and light, her shape unraveling like smoke. "Please," she said, reaching out. "Ring the bell for us." But he didn't. He hurled it against the stone wall with every ounce of strength he had. The bell shattered. A blinding flash of blue light erupted, filling the chamber. The walls cracked, dust exploded upward, and the bells on the crosses began to fall one by one, each ringing a final, desperate note before shattering into silence. Eleanor screamed, not in anger, but in something that sounded like release. Her form flickered, broke apart into 1,000 glowing motes, and vanished into the earth. Then, silence. Real silence. Jack fell to his knees, lungs burning, ears ringing with the echo of freedom. When he finally opened his eyes again, the room was gone. He was in the barn, morning sunlight streaming through the broken roof. The trapdoor lay open, but the space beneath it was just dirt now, solid, cold, lifeless. He stumbled outside, calling for Dusty. The horse stood by the fence, trembling but alive. The sky was clear. The air was still. Jack mounted up and rode away without looking back. Behind him, the old ranch stood quiet, its shadow shrinking with the sun. The wind carried only the sound of rustling grass, no bells, no whispers, no ghosts. But as he reached the ridge, he thought he heard something faint, almost imagined. A single, distant ring, carried softly on the wind. The sun dipped low behind the ridge as Jack rode, the horizon glowing blood orange. Dusty's hooves thudded against the dry soil, the only sound in miles. Jack's hands still trembled on the reins, his mind replaying the glow, the screaming, the silence that followed. He'd left the ranch far behind, yet it lingered in the corners of his vision like an afterimage burned into his eyes. By the time he reached the main road, the air had changed again, cooler, clearer. The weight that had pressed on his chest since the night before seemed lighter. He wanted to believe it was over, that breaking the bell had ended everything. But as the first stars blinked awake in the deepening dusk, he realized something strange. The air smelled like lavender again. He pulled Dusty to a stop. The horse's ears flicked, restless. "You smell it too," Jack muttered. "It's not possible." He looked back toward the valley. The McAllister homestead sat miles behind him now, a tiny silhouette swallowed by the evening haze. No light glowed there. No sound reached him. Just wind and fading sunlight. And yet, there it was. That faint chime, as if from a bell too far to see but too close to ignore. Jack closed his eyes, trying to shake the sound from his mind. But it persisted, soft and rhythmic, the same tone that had rung beneath the barn. The same tone that had summoned her. He reached into his coat pocket, half expecting to find the broken bell he'd thrown, but there was nothing. Only the small oilcloth-wrapped journal of Eleanor McAllister. He hadn't realized he'd kept it. He opened it with trembling fingers. The pages were blank. Every word, every drawing, every trace of her hand, gone. Only one faint sentence remained pressed into the paper's grain, barely visible in the dim light: "The land remembers who listens." A shiver ran through him. He turned the horse toward town, desperate to see another human face, a fire, a street lamp, something that didn't breathe with secrets. But the road felt longer than before. Every mile looked the same, every tree leaning at the same strange angle. After a while, he wasn't sure he was moving forward at all. The stars blurred overhead. Dusty whinnied softly, uneasy. Then, from the side of the road, came a faint blue shimmer, like moonlight caught in smoke. It danced between the weeds, weaving along the fence line. Jack froze. "Not again," he whispered. The light moved closer, slow, deliberate. And as it neared, he saw her. Eleanor. No longer ghostly, no longer bound in sorrow. She looked almost human again, calm, peaceful. The bell was gone from her hands. Her eyes met his with something like gratitude and regret. Jack's throat closed. "What do you want from me?" Her voice was soft, carried on the wind. "You freed the land. But freedom always costs." He shook his head. "I destroyed it." "You ended the covenant," she said. "Now it must rest, and someone must stay to remember it." The wind rose, carrying whispers through the grass. He heard names, laughter, distant church bells, all blending into one long sigh that seemed to stretch across a century. Eleanor stepped closer. "The land chooses who listens, Jack. It chose you." The blue light surrounded her, spreading outward, crawling up Dusty's legs, wrapping around the horse's flanks like smoke. Jack tried to back away, but the reins stiffened in his hands, frozen by the cold light. "Wait," he gasped. "No," her expression softened. "It won't hurt. You'll just stay." He felt warmth spreading through his chest, not burning, not cold, just an impossible calm. His thoughts blurred, then cleared, and for the first time since he'd seen that blue glow under the barn, he wasn't afraid. He looked down. His hands were glowing faintly, the skin fading to light. The reins slipped through his fingers. "Tell them," he tried to say, but the words dissolved into the wind. Eleanor nodded once, her form dissolving too, scattering like mist into the night. The light flared one final time, then vanished, leaving only the stars. Dusty stood alone on the empty road, reins hanging loose, the saddle empty. He pawed the ground once, then turned back toward the valley. By dawn, the McAllister ranch stood as it always had, silent, forgotten, untouched by time. The trapdoor was gone, the barn still leaning, the air still and pure. But if you rode past on a quiet night, you might hear something faint. The echo of a bell, soft as a breath, ringing once from beneath the earth. And sometimes, just before dawn, a lone horse could be seen standing by the fence line, watching the house with patient eyes. They say the land keeps its memories. And now, it remembers Jack Lawson.